Welcome back to the Lessons for Tomorrow podcast, the motivational poster in your ear. I'm your host, Tim Ahlenius, VP of Strategic Initiatives at AmericanEagle.com. In this episode, we're going to be diving into B2B commerce, and today I am joined by Znode, our special guests in-house, with Tom Flierl and Rupesh Agrawal. Tom is the Vice President, Marketing and Business Development at Amla Commerce, and he is a thoroughly experienced business leader. He has been a part of the success in the B2B and B2C space for the past 2 decades, and his industry knowledge includes professional services, technology, manufacturing, distribution, healthcare, financial services, consumer packaged goods, and much more. Previously, Tom held leadership positions at 2 digital agencies and a custom software development shop. He is frequently featured as a speaker and thought leader on digital commerce and the integration of branding, marketing, and technology, and for the past 4 years has been at Amla Commerce. Rupesh, our special guest, is the president and CEO at Amla Commerce, creator of Artify and Znode. With over 20 years in the e-commerce space, he's an executive, entrepreneur, developer, and e-commerce evangelist. With nearly 200 successful e-commerce deployments, he has extensive experience working with a plethora of e-commerce platforms, ranging from mid to enterprise level solutions. Prior to joining Amla Commerce as president and CEO, he was president and CEO of Xeon Solutions and senior e-business platform developer at Brady Corporations. Rupesh brings forward inspirational leadership and guidance for growth for businesses of all sizes. I'm in the presence of sheer genius expertise in the e-commerce world here. I'm so excited today. Tom, Rupesh, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Tim. Great to be here.
So today we're going to be talking a lot about B2B commerce, but before we dive into that, tell me a little bit about Znode and where you're at today, maybe where you were before a little bit, and just where things are evolving with Znode itself and the B2B commerce space.
So Tim, this is Rupesh here, just to get everyone familiarized with my voice. But I was also doing e-commerce implementations. So before I started the product company, my goal was to help companies implement various different platforms, from Magento to Hybris to Sitecore to several other platforms, and did that for 15 years. And realized that I think I have love for building a platform that sort of helps all the needs that is in the market that some of the platforms that we work with don't do as well. So I ran into Znode and acquired that, and there we go, and started that journey. Yeah, and started that journey. And then as soon as I got going in Znode, we basically decided to rebuild it ground up based on all the experience that me and my team had gathered, in our experiences. So that's how the journey started.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Tom, your journey coming into Znode?
Yeah, basically I had been working in a digital agency and working with various e-commerce and CMS platforms, and Rupesh and I met through a friend at lunch, and we talked about Znode and the platform and the opportunity in the market, and it was pretty easy to make a decision from there. And it's been a great 4 years. So
wonderful, wonderful. I missed the trade shows where I got to see you, Tom, and I think Rupesh, 1 or 2, we may have bumped into each other. But overall, just with the field of e-commerce and just a popular topic on most of the show episodes is just the impact that we saw in the industry, and really want your guys' take on how B2B commerce was impacted with the pandemic. A lot of businesses were forced to go into a faster digital transformation than they were before. B2B historically has always been a little bit behind on the B2C front as far as technology adoption and the e-commerce push, but it's definitely been gaining traction and ground over the past several years. But last year definitely had a big impact on them. So what are some of the things that you saw happening as a result of the pandemic and everything?
What we saw, Tim, was that doors that used to be open were closed. So the traditional salesperson, my dad was actually a purchasing agent for a manufacturing company. So I always have this story of I knew that he had a desk with catalogs behind it, and people are constantly coming in his office, and that's how he bought. And that he's retired, but that still was alive pre-COVID and B2B. Suddenly COVID happens and people are working from home, and that really accelerated the need for purchasing agents now to not be able to meet with a rep face-to-face, but to be able to transact online. So, and different manufacturers and distributors were already investing in B2B, but it accelerated their need to invest because the traditional doors were closed, and now they had to use electronic commerce as a means of selling it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And was there any impact that you see your product helping in that transition? And just talk to me a little bit about how Znode is the right fit for a company that either is looking to get into that space, right? And there's still some that are out there that haven't made that transition yet, but then also others who may have been on a solution that I typically find with B2B clients, there's a lot of, I'll call it senior technology stacks, where there's a lot of history behind why they're there. They're stuck there for some reason. It's a much larger effort, but the commerce need is so great. How does Znode help come into play when the conversation is with a company that's either brand new looking at it, or when it's going to have to fit it into an existing tech stack?
Yeah, good question. And we see the same thing in B2B. If companies had already invested in B2B e-commerce, they were on legacy platforms. It could be that 10 years ago they bought a platform that was really developed for B2C and didn't have a lot of flexibility, and they customized it to a level where it's now very slow and it needs a lot of care in order to stay working. Or maybe they had a homegrown system, and the issue became speed to market. COVID hits, they need to change how they sell, they need to stand up a new store, maybe they need to change their catalogs based upon accounts, etc. And their IT teams didn't grow exponentially with what the customer demanded. And so, how Znode fits in there, a lot of times we're not working with customers that it's their first time at e-commerce. They're actually replacing a legacy system or a highly customized platform that's older. And what we see happening with a lot of customers is that they're able to get to market faster than they could with a legacy platform. And they're able to get to market faster than most other platforms that we would be competing against, especially if their product information is in good shape. But the ability to import product information, quickly stand up a store, apply account-based pricing rules, typically they can get to market fast. And then there's the other pieces of the project, like integrating with an ERP and pulling data in and out. That is so crucial in B2B.
Yeah. So what we saw and what we continue to see now is, it's not an option anymore. Doing business via online is the way to go, right? So some of the a lot of customers who are not ready to make these moves, they didn't have an option, right? So that accelerated. And then what we are realizing in the B2B world and the whole multi-channel world is traditional platforms that have been around for a decade, they solve traditional problems. They don't solve what the need today is, right? And what we are seeing is, as soon as we go to customers that have been doing businesses for decades, and their e-commerce needs have become commerce needs, because that's how commerce is done today, right? Yeah. So to me, ease dropped from there, right? So when you look at commerce needs, it's true multi-channel. And I can't just fit a traditional e-commerce platform that was B2C and now it's being advertised as B2B capable as well. It doesn't just fit the bill. So these customers have needs for their end customers, the way they do businesses together for decades, and they're unique, right? Yeah. And the platforms today need to be extremely flexible. And that's where the headless and ease of integration and ease of thinking much broader and bringing that, right? We always use an example of, banking went through this revolution a decade ago. Now with your Chase phone app, you can do everything. You hardly go to the lobby and drive through and whatnot, right? You pretty much do everything on your phone. The same thing is going to start happening in the B2B world, where all that is going to happen. But in order to pull that together, a traditional B2C platform can't do that. It's not just, going and searching for a product, adding to the cart and check out. It's not consumer business. When you think about B2B, it's a lot more complex. I want to see my history from the ERP system, because I had a lot of orders in the last 10 years that I never placed online. Yeah. I need my contract pricing. I need to see things based on my agreements that are in place. So what we see is in order to make customers adapt, they really need to give them everything. And that's what we are seeing.
Yeah. So I'm going to unpack on one word that both of you used. There's a couple others I'm going to unpack later too, but flexibility. You both mentioned that, and we've seen that as well here at AmericanEagle.com of where a client comes in, a B2B client, and they need a flexible solution because, to your point, Rupesh, the B2C platforms that are out there don't have what is needed by a B2B customer.
Yep.
And especially in B2B commerce. In future, just full discretion, I'm going to steal your drop the E in e-commerce, sure. And it's just commerce now because it's so true. But overall, the flexible needs, both from a pricing perspective, from multi-store, right?
Yep.
There's a lot of things that B2B has a historical need always for that B2C platforms never have to address. And when they try to address it, they don't have the knowledge and experience of it. And when they try and force it, it's going to give the end customer a bigger problem because they're customizing as much as they can to make it work the way it needs to, versus Zeno's really coming in with that mindset already because you're B2B focused.
100%.
So with that, when we look at multi-store, multi-channel, what are some other ways, and I'm going to pick on another word that you both used, but headless. And another big buzzword right now. So headless has been a buzzword for a while, and we can go into all sorts of philosophical debates about what headless truly means to people. But composable commerce is the other big one. And so how are you seeing both either headless or composable commerce really, or composable overall is just a general term because there's composable architecture, composable just non-commerce aspects to the way the word's being used. I feel like it's one of those that Gartner or Forrester came out and were like, we're using this word this year. It's the word of the year. It's I call it in my last episode, like the Merriam dictionary or Webster's dictionary of here's the word of the year. Today it's composable. But headless has been one too. So how has headless really kind of changed the way Zeno's looked at things, or have you seen customers needing to approach it?
Yeah, so what I would say is these are obviously buzzwords, right? And the words don't solve the problems. What solves the problem, what we are seeing is, imagine like a Lego set, right? Mm-hmm. And the platform really needs to be as flexible as that. Like, you don't have to really just go build that same train that is on the picture. You need to be able to put those things together in the way you want. And what we believe is headless, composable, they all ultimately mean that a customer can use the platform as a framework and really extend it and expand it according to how they have been doing business for their end customers. Mm-hmm. So that's what really headless and composable and all these things ultimately get you to. Yeah. So it's going to be a buzzword that you're going to pretty much hear every platform claiming they are, but we all know, platforms have been around decades, and these buzzwords weren't there.
Oh yeah.
So everyone is trying to rapidly sort of change their marketing campaigns.
Yeah. It's like the word experience. Yes. I probably say the word 1,000 times a day because of all the changes that's happened. I've been saying it for a good number of years now, and it's like, now it's not a CMS platform anymore. It's a DXP platform. Yes. It's just headless is the new commerce word for the year. So, we could also just say headless is the new orange, but we won't go there. Yeah. So overall, when we look at some of the aspects of the complexity of B2B e-commerce or commerce, to your point, let's talk a little bit more about just pains in the market right now. What are you seeing that Znode is really fitting the need of for your customers and when you're going out there?
Yeah, and that's a really good question, right? And I'll take a nice case study here and I'll give that to you. So we have a customer in southeastern U.S. and southeast U.S. This customer started 100 years ago. They started building a product that was being sold to local small restaurants. Then they started selling that product to bigger, large, franchises like Marriott hotels, right? Then they saw, we can even sell it to consumers because our brand is starting to get recognized. Then they started partnering with airlines to serve, their customers the same product. So as they build this ecosystem, they have 5 to 7 different channels of how they sell. Mm-hmm. They've got a B2C need because, I as their consumer, consuming their brand, like their product on the airline that I was flying. So I go home and I'm looking online saying, I want to buy this. Mm-hmm. They have their large franchises, which are big contracts that need to be buying. They have small retailers that are buying. that want to have their products in their store and so on. And then they've got these small, mid to size businesses that are buying, and they all buy differently, right? A Marriott hotel buys large quantities for different regions, whereas airlines, have different kinds of contracts. So that's a great case study, and I know people use the word B2B. B2B can mean, 100 different things, right? And I just gave you an example of 7 different ways a $250 million family-owned 100-year-old business is selling, right? And Znode solves that for them. That's when we say true multi-channel. We are able to come in, centralize all their product information, and let them launch all of these different portals/stores, for their different targets, and let them do the business. And with single integration to SAP, they can achieve all that. That's a good use case, when what we call as complex B2B. Because in a traditional way, when we walk into customers like that, they've got a Shopify store for B2C. They've got a legacy platform like Hybris for their B2B, and they're still suffering because they're not able to take care of these other 4 channels that are asking for commerce online.
Yeah,
and that's the beauty of Znode.
Wonderful. Tom, any additions to that? The example is spot on about the multi-channel need. If you don't take that approach with a platform or a framework that can really build for what your organization needs, you end up with this splintered tech stack that you've got multiple people managing multiple channels that aren't communicating to one another. So you really are working in silos in that perspective, and you try and integrate them. Well, good luck. But
Right. And you can take that pain and multiply it because there's multiple ERP integrations. But where we also see a lot of efficiency on top of the total cost of ownership being reduced and operational efficiencies is customer service teams. The ability to be logging into one back-end administration console, managing orders, ordering on behalf of, basically helping the customer through a purchasing journey, but not having to log into 4 different back-ends to do that based upon who the customer is. And also helping with turnover in those companies. So it's not uncommon for customer service people to turn over and inside sales people to turn over. Well, to onboard a new inside salesperson or customer service rep and then train them on 4 different platforms, it's painful. It causes more turnover, right? It just accelerates some of the human capital issues that are also a big issue for businesses today as well.
Oh, yeah, a big problem today. And as we look at just some additional pains in the market, where are we at with regards to just the ability for subscription-based ordering, and how is that impacting in the B2B space? I look at the fact that usually you have the buyers, and Tom, you mentioned kind of that experience with your dad with manufacturing and the catalogs, right? That's what I always think about when I think about B2B is just the big catalogs that you would order from. And but overall, we've seen a lot of growing desire for subscription solutions with commerce. And I look at it where, Rupesh, you mentioned a manufacturer who ended up in multiple channels, including B2C. And I always use my own life as an example, and my wife, which is always fun, but she never listens. I'll
this is
always
being
talk
recorded,
about her. Oh, I know. I tell her every time. I go, you should listen to it. You might understand what I do for my job. But either way, we have a GE refrigerator. We have a little water filter in it. It's just another one of those wonderful things that they've got you now every, few months. You got to replace that water filter. It's the easiest solution where they go, oh, well, sign up for our subscription program and we'll just mail them to you on a regular basis. Same with air filters, etc. I look at that and I go, well, GE, big brand, right? They have B2B channels. They have B2C channels. And I sign up for a subscription. It's a different process, and I've seen a lot more B2C subscriptions that are starting to offer the ability to be flexible with when you change your subscription order. Do you really need a refill right now? Are you seeing any need for subscription ordering on the B2B side with who you've been working with? And does Znode accommodate for some of that subscription aspect?
Yeah, so we definitely accommodate for that. What we are seeing is it's more of a B2C consumables, right? So you give the filter example. HP is doing that with their printer ink now. Printer on a subscription, right? And all kinds of consumables, right, on the B2C. On the B2B world, it really depends customers to customers, or manufacturer to manufacturer, depending on what kind of products they're selling. So there is a need for sure but it all depends on the product type. If you run into consumables, yes, but then also so the percentage, if you have consumables, the percentage is high in that market. If not, then we don't see that.
Yeah, and I just want a stat drop here for all the listeners from Znode's Ultimate B2B E-commerce Guide. You can find a link in the show notes here, but just from the U.S. perspective, the U.S. B2B e-commerce market's projected to reach a value of $1.8 trillion by 2023, which will be about 17% of all U.S. sales. That's a massive number. And I think that also goes to show the need for a tech platform that solves your B2B needs, but you can continue to grow within. And I know Znode provides that opportunity. And with the e-commerce adoption rate being kind of accelerated in the B2B space, where are you seeing, if we say just 2023 to 2025, where's B2B commerce going to grow in your minds? And, in this little, crystal ball moment here, it's not, we're not holding anyone to anything, but just what do you think is going to be some of the additional changes coming?
Yeah, I can jump in and take some of that. So the stats that I've also seen state that roughly 80% of all distributors already have an e-commerce platform. Well, I did see a stat today that said 40% of distributors would like to replatform. So, what are we seeing is it still goes back to, on the distributor side, these legacy platforms that some distributors may be underinvested initially, because they were dipping their toe in the water, and all of a sudden now they have to have a dynamic platform. So we're seeing that, and then with that comes the maturity of, well, here's the 5 mistakes we made in the past, whether it's the speed of the platform, whether it's the flexibility of the platform, whether it's some true B2B functionality that didn't exist. I think there's just a maturity state happening there. As you go more upstream in distributors, then typically you also have multi-brand opportunities as are issues as well, right? So the distributor may have 5 different distributor brands because M&A activity is very heavy in the distribution space right now. So how do you manage 5 different brands and cross-sell across those brands if you're a billion-dollar distributor? That would be the next move that we see on that side. On the manufacturing side, it's a little bit different, right? So on the manufacturing side, last stat I saw, only 39% of manufacturers had invested in B2B e-commerce. So as you go upstream, obviously that number gets greater, but it's the same thing there. Manufacturers often have homegrown e-commerce platforms that were primarily put in place to connect to the ERP and create a portal for distributors. Now they're seeing the opportunity to, basically publish their catalog online, maybe not share prices for the sake of growing their business through SEO, right? So a different experience than a portal. And then somebody usually in a marketing department says, well, why don't we take this one product line and sell it direct to consumer or, direct to customer? And again, what do you have there? Now you have multi-channel. And then, of course, you want to syndicate your products to Grainger and Amazon Business. And, well, there's another channel. So what does it look like in the next couple of years? I think you said 2025. It really is going to be e-commerce is commerce. Multi-channel is behind everything, but that's also very complex, right? So how do you solve for all of that? We would argue Znode, but we'd also argue that flexibility of it sits between your ERP, your CRM, maybe it's sitting between 3 ERPs because of acquisitions and a CRM. And so it's a little bit of being able to serve different channels, but also to operationally to be able to sit between these legacy systems, pull data and serve the right information, catalog, content to the right customer. That's a long answer, Tim, but that's where it's
good.
going.
It's good because I fully agree that the multi-channel, and especially like you mentioned, the feeds out in the channels to Grainger or to Amazon Business, those have been around. You've seen some businesses adopt it, some who went onto it and then came off of it as well. And it just depends on their strategy of where they want to be. But I look at just the difference that's also happened in the past 18 months, 20 months now, of that sudden shift, right? And you gave some good stats about 80% have an e-commerce platform in the B2B space, but 40% are considering a replatform of that because they were forced into it. A lot of people were also forced into new channels last year, new methods. now this past 5-6 months of 2021, I've been seeing a lot of the reconsideration of, well, we did that because of the moment in 2020. Now we're looking to actually see how to optimize and what's correct. And moving forward with that, when you look at all those different channels, you got to look at the data model, right? And the way that you're feeding out each channel and the different ways that Headless can bring into play the information that's there. We can now use that data in so many different ways through a Headless approach. So commerce is one of them. You've got your product catalog. You talked about the pricing. Well, with Headless, a lot of that's API driven first. So when you look at implementing a lot of the solutions nowadays, almost everything has an API. And so if we have an API first mentality, we can actually be in a lot of those systems with information because we can connect between them.
Yep.
And I think that brings back again to that word we're kind of centering around, flexible, right? The flexibility of that solution needs to have an API. It needs to be able to drive through a headless approach, which is typically API driven. And with that, we get into the ability to be in multiple channels. We give the different feeds. We give the different experiences at the end of the day, because we talked a little bit earlier about, well, those acquisitions, I've got 5 brands now. I've got 5 different call centers. I have to train them on either one platform solution, and now I have a better opportunity to ensure that I have employee coverage no matter the brand, or I have to have 5 different teams trained on 5 different systems and hope that they connect information. And by the way, if you cross-sell between those brands, good luck on them being able to find the right information to deliver the results to the customer at the end of the day. With all that, and I know I was just long-winded there. That's me. I can be that way. I want to talk about just pricing structures. One of the biggest things that we usually have to talk through with B2B customers is the different ways that they handle pricing structures. And a lot of that stems from their ERP, their pricing model that they have in place as an organization. So I know it's unique. Again, brings us back to flexibility. But what are you seeing as the way that Znode helps solve that for customers?
That's a great question, Tim. So when we talk about pricing, right, in the B2B world, there are no rules for it. The sales rep might have a relationship with a customer for a decade or 2 decades or 5 decades, and they might have a unique pricing just for that special customer or a contractor and so on. So we see all kinds of different rules for different end users and so on. And that's what we try to solve in Znode. Is we said, based on our 20 years of experience, we have learned that when we go into the B2B world, the pricing can be from A to Z. And traditional platforms solve for a couple use cases: the standard pricing, and maybe they'll provide user group pricing. So group prices, right? That's pretty typical in our industry.
Yep.
What we did was we said, well, no, we got to solve for other 3 to 5 use cases as well, so that we give flexibility, so that we can have matrix prices, we can have tier pricing, and these are all standard things. But then the key is having, Mr. Smith's prices and Mr. Agrawal's prices. How do we allow them to do that? How do we allow them to do real-time pricing from these various ERP systems, and then cache it in a manner where it's speed, because people want speed, and at the same time bringing them real-time prices. Yeah. So support for that. So I can rattle so many different use cases here, but the whole idea is we have to understand in B2B world, where traditional sales reps have been having these relationships for decades, and they did have special kind of pricing for their customers, and their customers expect that to be seen on the website if you're going to try to move them to start doing transactions online. If you're not going to do that, they're going to still call the sales rep and say, I don't see my pricing here. Yep. So why don't you just do that order for me? Yeah. And in order to do that transition, we got to start supporting all those use cases.
No, absolutely. Love the flexibility there. You bring up the point that some people will call if they aren't seeing the information or the pricing that they're expecting. Have you had any examples of organizations who implemented a B2B commerce platform, in this case Znode, and the sellers were a bit hesitant to adopt it because they value that relationship that they've had for possibly 20 plus years? And I know we've dealt with that with a few clients when they were kind of adopting into the new technology, getting that opportunity to let the buyers come in and just go through a portal. versus call up the rep? Have you seen any change in that mentality?
Yeah, so I'll throw in another buzzword here, Tim. Channel conflict, right? And we've all heard this for 2 decades now since Amazon came out, right? Oh my God, B2B is never going to happen online because of all these channels, right? So you're talking about internal, sales reps as well as external distributors, right? So all these channel conflicts. What has happened, I would tell you, is 10 years ago, these were real conflicts, and you'd go to a manufacturer's site, a B2B site, and you'll see we can buy from, and then there'll be links to all kinds of, Home Depot sites and Amazon and whatnot, right? Because the channels prohibited them to sell direct.
Yeah.
But especially with COVID now, and with the way the shift is happening already, right? The internal sales reps as well as the distributors and other channel, they're all realizing that this is going to happen. And in order to actually let manufacturer elevate their brands, they will have to do that. And I think so that there's a realization that is happening across. It has definitely accelerated with COVID. So I think now the key is the platform needs to be flexible so that it supports these different rules that B2B world is coming with, how to handle these conflicts. So I think what you'll see is the sales rep, a traditional sales rep, is going to be totally fine as long as all the allocations for the commissions and everything is done appropriately and the platform solves that.
Yeah. Wonderful.
That, and the platform should also enable the salespeople with data so that they are actually going to customers with data saying, whatever, here's the 20 items you usually order. However, these other 10 would fit well into your mix, your product mix, and they can use the data from e-commerce to actually upsell and to build tighter relationships. So maybe you can talk a little bit about the sales console.
Yeah. So Tim, one of the things that we have done and at Znode recently is we have actually released what is called a sales rep portal, right? So you have the
whole new UI.
Yes, whole new UI, right? So whole new UI. So we've got the B2C store, we've got the B2B store, like I said. And now we have sales rep portal. So as a sales rep, you can go in, select the account, see what's happening, get a full 360-degree view, and then also assist with orders. So you can take your iPad, go to so they're all seeing the same thing. Everyone is searching the same way, looking for the same things. So we are actually trying to make it true multi-channel and enable sales reps to use online and let their customers use the same tools and so on.
Yeah. No, and again, the importance of that is that it's all based off the same central data set, because you now get, to your point, that full 360 as a sales rep. A B2B goes in, they see their information, they get all their past order history, which is critical to them. Until I worked with B2B e-commerce clients here at American Eagle, I didn't realize the importance of the longevity of data that B2B buyers wanted. And how they were always adamant, we have to pull that data in, we have to bring it in. But they were using that, and they were reordering from it and looking at just all that information to make decisions. So, all right, so I want to wrap us up here. We're coming up towards the end, but I really want to get, Tom gave us a little bit of the future, but Rupesh, I want to get a little bit more of the future thoughts from you of just what does it hold for us? The next iteration of B2B commerce specifically in your mind, if you could say, I want to see it do that, what would that be?
That's a loaded question. Thanks for the heads up.
Yeah.
No, so to me, right, if you think about it, e-commerce hasn't changed, right? All the traditional platforms keep thinking the same way. I would say even at Znode, we started thinking the same way. We just need another platform, right? And there's plethora of e-commerce platforms, right? Too bad I didn't invent Zoom, right? So the key is, I think what is going to end up happening is eventually, remember what used to be called customer portals, and IBM had portlets and whatnot, right? Eventually, what I think is going to happen is in 5 to 10 years, right, the graduation of all the B2B is going to happen to such a level where the end customers, they would want to see everything just like you can go see it in an ERP like SAP.
Yeah.
It's going to become a true portal for me to see everything about how I've done business with you. Just like you can do that with a Chase phone app.
Yeah.
That's where the world is going. I think we are still, in the Shopify and the B2C world, and people are not seeing the big vision is like customers are going to expect to see everything pay online, pay their invoices online. There is going to be no paper trail. Suddenly, you know, you're going to see it in the B2B portal. Turn my, you know, online statements, you know, on, right? So that way I never even get any paper trail. I don't have to. So I think that's those things are going to come back, believe it or not.
Yeah, I love it. I love the app example too, because one of the ones just for my future, you know, as I see different things, and I went through just some repair stuff at my home recently, and I brought in a repair guy, but the QR codes, the Internet of Things, just how do we look to have that help automate the, you know, repair orders that go in, the assignment of the jobs, the parts are all there, but you can actually let that portal build that entire
100%.
Day out.
The warranty
lookup, all of it.
Yep.
The manual process today, I want to get rid of. I completely agree, and the paper trail too. I mean, like you said, I had to go into the bank the other day for cashier's check. It was like, wait, what do I have to do again?
Exactly.
It's like, but I can't send that through, you know, online, and it's coming.
Yeah.
But to your point, that app is so powerful. That's what these same B2B portals will start to deliver on. So it's great.
Yep.
It's great. Well, Tom, Rupesh, so great to have you on the show today. Any final thoughts before we sign off from this episode?
No, I think thank you, Tim. I think you asked some really good questions, you know, and it was wonderful.
Great.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Thanks for hosting us.
Absolutely. Everyone, thank you for tuning into the future by listening to the Lessons for Tomorrow podcast. For more information about the topics discussed today, check out the description of this episode, along with links to the ultimate B2B e-commerce guide from Znode. If you want us to cover a topic or submit feedback, please email us at lessonsfortomorrow@americaneagle.com and let us know. While you're at it, if you wouldn't mind giving us a rating and sharing this podcast with others to prepare them for the future, and please don't forget to follow us on Twitter at lessonsfortomorrow. This episode is brought to you by AmericanEagle.com Studios. I'm your host, Tim Ahlenius, and I'll catch you in the next lesson.